June 28, 1997. Las Vegas, Nevada, the MGM Grand Garden Arena. The crowd is roaring, 16,000 people packed into one of the most glamorous venues in the world. Millions more watching on pay-per-view around the globe. Two of the greatest heavyweight boxers of all time are standing in the ring, bathed in blinding spotlight. The air is thick with anticipation, sweat, and the smell of expensive cologne mixed with cheap beer. In one corner stands Evander Holyfield, the champion, the underdog who had already done the impossible once. In the other corner, Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet, seeking redemption, seeking revenge, seeking to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. But nobody in that arena, not the celebrities in the front row, not the commentators at ringside, not even the referees standing between these two warriors, could have predicted what was about to happen in the next few minutes. What occurred that night would become one of the most shocking, controversial, and talked about moments in sports history. It would end one man's career trajectory and cement another's legacy. It would be replayed millions of times, discussed in barbershops and boardrooms, analyzed by psychologists and sports historians. Mike Tyson was about to do something so unthinkable, so primal, so shocking that it would overshadow everything else he had ever accomplished in the ring. But to understand how we got to that moment, we need to go back to where it all began. The rise of Iron Mike, Brooklyn, New York, the 1970s and early 1980s. Michael Gerard Tyson didn't have an easy childhood. That's putting it mildly. Born on June 30th, 1966 in the rough neighborhoods of Brownsville, Brooklyn, young Mike grew up in a world of poverty, violence, and chaos. His father abandoned the family when Mike was just 2 years old. His mother, Lorna, struggled with alcohol and died when Mike was only 16. By the age of 13, Tyson had already been arrested more than 30 times. He was a troubled kid, bullied for his high-pitched voice and lisp, angry at the world, getting into fights, stealing, running with the wrong crowd. He seemed destined for prison or worse. But then something happened that would change everything. In 1980, Tyson was sent to the Tryon School for Boys, a reform school in upstate New York. It was there that a counselor named Bob Stewart noticed something special about the troubled teenager. Mike could fight, not just street brawl. He had natural boxing ability, raw power, lightning-fast hands, and an intimidating presence despite being just a kid. Stewart began training Tyson in boxing and soon introduced him to the man who would become the most important figure in his life, Cus D'Amato. Cus D'Amato was a legendary boxing trainer who had already shaped champions. He was in his 70s, living in Catskill, New York, running a small boxing gym above a police station. When he first saw young Mike Tyson, he saw something that made his old heart race with excitement. "That's the heavyweight champion of the world," D'Amato reportedly said after watching the teenage Tyson spar for just a few minutes. D'Amato became more than a trainer to Tyson. He became a father figure, a mentor, a guiding light. He legally adopted Mike after his mother died. He taught him the peekaboo boxing style, constant head movement, hands held high, explosive combinations from a crouched position. But more importantly, he taught him discipline, confidence, and how to channel his rage into something productive. "The hero and the coward both feel the same thing," D'Amato would tell Tyson. "But the hero uses his fear, projects it onto his opponent while the coward runs. It's the same thing, fear, but it's what you do with it that matters." Under D'Amato's guidance, Tyson's amateur career was spectacular. But tragedy struck in November 1985, just as Mike was about to turn professional. Cus D'Amato died of pneumonia. Tyson was devastated. He had lost another father figure, but he was determined to make Cus's prediction come true. he would become heavyweight champion of the world. The youngest heavyweight champion. What happened next was nothing short of phenomenal. Mike Tyson turned professional on March 6, 1985 at the age of 18. His first professional fight lasted just 107 seconds. He knocked out Hector Mercedes in the first round. And that was just the beginning. Fight after fight, opponent after opponent, Tyson destroyed everyone in his path. He wasn't just winning. He was annihilating grown men, many of them experienced professional fighters. His combination of speed, power, and aggression was unlike anything the heavyweight division had ever seen. Tyson was only 5'10", short for a heavyweight, but he fought like a man possessed. He would bob and weave, slip inside his opponent's reach, and then unleash devastating combinations. Uppercuts, hooks, straight rights that seemed to come from another dimension. Many of his opponents looked terrified before the opening bell even rang. The intimidation factor was real. Tyson would walk to the ring without a robe, just black trunks and black shoes, his muscles rippling, his face an expressionless mask. He looked like a gladiator. He looked like violence incarnate. On November 22, 1986, at just 20 years old, Mike Tyson became the youngest heavyweight champion in history by defeating Trevor Berbick. He won by TKO in the second round, battering Berbick so badly that the older fighter stumbled around the ring like he was drunk before the referee stopped the fight. Tyson had done it. He had made Cus D'Amato's prediction come true. Over the next few years, Tyson was unstoppable. He unified the heavyweight division, holding the WBA, WBC, and IBF titles simultaneously. He defended his titles successfully again and again. By 1988, he was perhaps the most famous athlete on the planet, a cultural phenomenon who transcended sports. He was on magazine covers. He appeared in commercials. He made millions of dollars. He married actress Robin Givens in a high-profile ceremony. He seemed to have everything. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. The fall after Cus D'Amato's death, Tyson's life began to spiral. The discipline and structure that D'Amato had provided were gone. Tyson fell under the influence of promoter Don King, a controversial figure who would later be accused of taking advantage of the young champion. Tyson's marriage to Robin Givens was a disaster. She later claimed he was physically abusive, and their toxic relationship played out in the tabloids. They divorced in 1989 after just 1 year of marriage. His behavior became increasingly erratic. There were stories of him crashing expensive cars, getting into altercations at nightclubs, and living a lifestyle of excess that would have destroyed lesser men. And then, in the ring, the unthinkable happened. February 11, 1990, Tokyo, Japan. Mike Tyson stepped into the ring against James Booster Douglas, a solid but unspectacular fighter who was a 42-1 underdog. Nobody gave Douglas a chance. This was supposed to be an easy payday for Tyson before bigger fights ahead. But Douglas had been training harder than ever, motivated by his mother's recent death. And Tyson was unfocused, undisciplined, out of shape by his standards. He had been partying in Tokyo, not taking the fight seriously. What happened that night shocked the world. Douglas boxed brilliantly, using his jab to keep Tyson at distance, landing combinations when Tyson got close. In the 8th round, Tyson knocked Douglas down, but Douglas got up at the count of 9 and survived the round. Then, in the 10th round, Douglas landed a perfectly timed uppercut followed by a flurry of punches that sent Tyson to the canvas for the first time in his professional career. Tyson struggled to find his mouthpiece as the referee counted to 10. The invincible Iron Mike Tyson had been knocked out. The loss stunned the boxing world. How could this happen? How could the baddest man on the planet lose to a 42-1 underdog? But that wasn't the worst of Tyson's troubles. Prison and the long road back. In 1991, Mike Tyson was accused of raping Desiree Washington, an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant, in an Indianapolis hotel room. Tyson maintained his innocence, claiming the encounter was consensual, but in 1992 he was convicted of rape and sentenced to 6 years in prison. For 3 years, from 1992 to 1995, Mike Tyson sat in an Indiana prison cell, the youngest heavyweight champion in history, the baddest man on the planet, locked away during what should have been the prime of his career. While in prison, Tyson converted to Islam and reportedly read voraciously, everything from philosophy to history. But he also lifted weights obsessively, did countless push-ups and sit-ups, stayed in peak physical condition. Because Mike Tyson had a plan. He was going to come back. He was going to reclaim his throne. When Tyson was released from prison in March 1995, the boxing world held its breath. Could he do it? Could he return to form after 3 years away? Was he still the same fighter who had terrorized the heavyweight division? His first fight back was on August 19, 1995, against Peter McNeely. It lasted just 89 seconds before McNeely's cornerman stopped the fight. Vintage Tyson. He fought again 2 months later, knocking out Buster Mathis Jr. in the 3rd round. The comeback was real. Iron Mike was back, but he still wasn't champion. The heavyweight titles were held by others now, including a fighter who many people had underestimated throughout his career. A fighter who would become Tyson's greatest rival and the man who would push him to his absolute breaking point. His name was Evander Holyfield. The real deal. While Mike Tyson was in prison, Evander Holyfield had become the man in the heavyweight division. But Holyfield's journey to the top had been very different from Tyson's. Born on October 19, 1962 in Atmore, Alabama, Evander "the real deal" Holyfield grew up in a religious household in Atlanta, Georgia. His mother, Annie Holyfield, raised him and his 8 siblings with strict Christian values. Evander sang in the church choir, and faith would remain central to his life. Unlike Tyson, Holyfield didn't come from the streets. He was disciplined from a young age, training in boxing as a way to channel his energy and aggression. He had a successful amateur career, winning the bronze medal at the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. He was controversially disqualified in the semi-finals after what many believed was a legal punch. Holyfield turned professional in 1984 and initially fought as a cruiserweight, the weight class just below heavyweight. He dominated the division, unifying all the cruiserweight titles and proving he was something special. In 1988, Holyfield made the move to heavyweight. Many doubted him. At 6'2" and around 210 pounds, he was smaller than most heavyweight contenders. People said he was too small, that the big boys would destroy him. They were wrong. Holyfield had incredible heart, phenomenal conditioning, and a warrior's mentality. He also had something else: unshakable faith. Before every fight, Holyfield would pray. He believed God was on his side, that he was meant to be champion. By 1990, after Tyson's shocking loss to Buster Douglas, Holyfield got his chance. He fought Douglas for the undisputed heavyweight championship and won by knockout in the 3rd round. Evander Holyfield was the heavyweight champion of the world. He would defend his title successfully against fighters like George Foreman and Larry Holmes. But in 1992, he lost his titles to Riddick Bowe in a brutal war. He regained them in a rematch in 1993, then lost them again to Michael Moorer in 1994. By 1996, many people thought Holyfield was finished. He was 34 years old, had been in too many wars, had heart problems that had forced him to briefly retire. He seemed past his prime, but Holyfield had one more run in him, and standing in his way was the man everyone wanted to see him fight, Mike Tyson. The First War. By late 1996, the fight everyone wanted to see was finally going to happen. Mike Tyson versus Evander Holyfield. It had been delayed for years due to Tyson's prison sentence, but now both men were ready. Tyson had been rebuilding his career after prison. Holyfield was the WBA heavyweight champion, having recaptured the title from Mike Tyson's old victim, Bruce Seldon. The fight was scheduled for November 9, 1996 at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas. The buildup was intense. Most people favored Tyson to win easily. He was younger, stronger, more explosive. Holyfield was seen as a shot fighter, a warrior who had been in too many wars. The odds reflected this. Tyson was a 25-1 favorite. "I'll eat his children," Tyson said during the buildup, referring to Holyfield in one of his typically bizarre and unsettling comments. "I'm the most vicious, the most ruthless champion there has ever been." Holyfield responded with calm confidence. "I'm not worried about Mike Tyson," he said. "I'm worried about glorifying God." On fight night, when the opening bell rang, something unexpected happened. Holyfield wasn't intimidated. In fact, Holyfield came right at Tyson, meeting him in the center of the ring, trading punches, pushing him back. Tyson, so used to opponents being afraid of him, seemed confused by Holyfield's aggression. As the rounds progressed, it became clear that Holyfield had a strategy, and it was working. He would tie Tyson up on the inside, neutralizing his power punches. He would push his head against Tyson's face. Some would later say he was headbutting, though this was debated. He would time his counters perfectly, catching Tyson as the younger man tried to attack. By the middle rounds, Tyson was breathing hard, looking frustrated. Holyfield was outboxing him, outworking him, outthinking him. In the sixth round, Holyfield hurt Tyson badly with a left hook. Tyson wobbled. The crowd erupted. This wasn't supposed to happen. The fight continued, but Tyson never recovered. Holyfield dominated the later rounds, and in the 11th round, the referee stopped the fight. Technical knockout. Evander Holyfield had defeated Mike Tyson. The boxing world was stunned. Again, the 25-1 underdog had won. The shot fighter had beaten the baddest man on the planet. Tyson was humiliated, embarrassed, angry. He claimed Holyfield had been headbutting him throughout the fight. Replays showed this was at least partially true. He made excuses, he demanded a rematch, and he got it. The rematch was scheduled for June 28, 1997. Same venue, same fighters, but this time everything would be different. This time something would happen that nobody could have predicted. The build-up to the rematch. The 7 months between the first fight and the rematch were tumultuous for Mike Tyson. He was bitter about the loss. He watched tapes of the first fight over and over, convinced that Holyfield had been headbutting him illegally throughout the contest. He complained to anyone who would listen that the referee hadn't done his job, that Holyfield was a dirty fighter, that he had been robbed. But privately, people close to Tyson said he was struggling mentally. The loss had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. For the first time in his career, he had faced an opponent who wasn't afraid of him, an opponent who could match his aggression and outwork him. Tyson's training for the rematch was reportedly inconsistent. Some days he would train with frightening intensity, destroying sparring partners and looking like the Tyson of old. Other days he would be distracted, unfocused, going through the motions. There were also troubling signs of his mental state. In interviews, Tyson seemed angrier than usual, more volatile. He talked about violence in unsettling ways, even for a professional fighter. "I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been," he said in one interview. "There's no one that can stop me. I want to kill people. I want to rip out their stomachs." These weren't your typical pre-fight sound bites. These were the words of a man on the edge. Meanwhile, Holyfield was the picture of calm preparation. He trained diligently, confident that he had Tyson's number. He knew the first fight wasn't a fluke. He had proven he could beat Tyson, and he believed he would do it again. "Mike is a good fighter, but I'm better," Holyfield said simply. "I proved it once, and I'll prove it again." The fight was dubbed The Sound and the Fury, a reference to Shakespeare and to the noise surrounding the event. It was one of the most anticipated rematches in boxing history. Pay-per-view records were expected to be shattered. The MGM Grand was sold out. Celebrities flew in from around the world. Everyone wanted to see if Tyson could redeem himself. No one expected what was actually going to happen. Fight night. June 28, 1997. Las Vegas in the summer is brutally hot, but inside the air-conditioned MGM Grand Garden Arena, the atmosphere was electric. Celebrities packed the front rows: Denzel Washington, Brad Pitt, Whoopi Goldberg, Michael Jordan, Jack Nicholson, and hundreds more. The ticket prices were astronomical, but nobody cared. This was the event to be at. In the locker rooms beneath the arena, both fighters prepared in their own ways. Evander Holyfield, surrounded by his team, prayed. He always prayed before fights. He asked God for strength, for protection, for victory. Then he wrapped his hands, put on his gloves, and waited calmly for his moment. Mike Tyson, in his locker room across the hall, paced like a caged animal. His team tried to keep him focused, but there was something different about him tonight. Something wild in his eyes. He was breathing heavily, psyching himself up, working himself into a frenzy. When the time came, both fighters made their walks to the ring. Holyfield entered first, wearing white trunks, looking calm and focused. The crowd gave him a respectful ovation. Then Tyson emerged, and the arena erupted. Love him or hate him, Mike Tyson was a spectacle. He wore his trademark black trunks and black shoes, no robe, his muscular frame glistening under the lights. He shadowboxed as he walked, his face a mask of controlled fury. When both men were in the ring, referee Mills Lane called them to the center for final instructions. Lane was a veteran referee, tough and no-nonsense, someone who had controlled countless big fights. "I want a good, clean fight," Lane told them. "Protect yourself at all times. Obey my commands. Touch gloves and come out fighting." Tyson and Holyfield touched gloves, but the tension was palpable. They stared at each other, neither backing down. Then they returned to their corners to wait for the opening bell. The crowd was on its feet. Millions watching at home leaned closer to their television screens. And then it began. Round 1. The pattern repeats: ding. The opening bell rang and both fighters moved to the center of the ring. Immediately it was clear that this fight would follow a similar pattern to their first encounter. Holyfield wasn't backing down. He came right at Tyson, jabbing, moving his head, looking to tie him up on the inside. Tyson tried to land his big right hand, but Holyfield was ready, slipping the punch and countering with his own shots. The crowd roared as both men traded punches in close quarters. About halfway through the round, something happened that would set the tone for what came next. As they clinched, Holyfield's head came up and appeared to catch Tyson near the eye. Tyson immediately complained to referee Mills Lane, pointing to his face. Lane looked but didn't see anything warranting a warning. He told them to continue fighting. Tyson seemed frustrated, but the round continued. Holyfield was winning the exchanges, landing the cleaner punches, dictating the pace. It was a competitive round, but most observers would give it to Holyfield. When the bell rang, ending the first round, Tyson walked back to his corner, clearly agitated. He was saying something to his corner, pointing to his eye. His team tried to calm him down, but something was building inside Mike Tyson. Something dangerous. Round 2. The breaking point. When round 2 began, Tyson came out more aggressively, trying to land his power shots early. But Holyfield continued to frustrate him, tying him up, pushing him back, making him work for every inch of real estate in the ring. Then, about a minute into the round, during another clinch, Holyfield's head came up again and caught Tyson, this time opening a cut above Tyson's right eye. Tyson exploded with anger. He immediately pushed Holyfield away and began complaining to Mills Lane again, pointing frantically at his cut. Blood was trickling down the side of his face. "He's headbutting me," Tyson yelled. Lane called time and brought in the ring doctor to examine the cut. The doctor determined it wasn't bad enough to stop the fight. Lane ruled the headbutt accidental. A clash of heads is common in boxing when fighters work on the inside, and deducted 2 points from Holyfield as a warning. But this did nothing to calm Tyson. If anything, he seemed even more furious. The 2-point deduction meant nothing to him. He wasn't thinking about points. He wasn't thinking about boxing strategy. He was thinking about revenge. When the fight resumed, Tyson was fighting differently, more wildly, more desperately. He was throwing punches with bad intentions, trying to hurt Holyfield, but Holyfield remained calm, composed, continuing to box smartly. The round ended with Holyfield still in control. In Tyson's corner, his team worked on the cut and tried to refocus him. But anyone watching closely could see that Mike Tyson was not in a good mental state. His eyes had a wild, unfocused look. His jaw was clenched. He was breathing hard. Not from exhaustion, but from rage. He was about to do something that would change his life forever. Round 3. The unthinkable. The bell rang for round 3. Both fighters moved to the center of the ring again. Holyfield was confident now, sensing that Tyson was mentally breaking. He continued his strategy of working on the inside, using his strength to push Tyson around. About 40 seconds into the round, they clinched against the ropes. And then it happened. Mike Tyson, in a moment of pure insanity, bent his head down and bit Evander Holyfield's right ear. He bit it hard. Holyfield's reaction was immediate and visceral. He jumped back from Tyson, spitting out his mouthpiece, dancing in a small circle with his gloves up by his head in a defensive position. He looked shocked, confused, in pain. He looked down, and there was a piece of his ear on the ring canvas. Mike Tyson had bitten off a chunk of Evander Holyfield's ear. The crowd, which had been roaring moments before, suddenly went quiet with confusion. What just happened? Did he just bite him? Referee Mills Lane quickly moved between the fighters. Holyfield was pointing at his ear, clearly distressed. Lane looked at Tyson, then at Holyfield's ear, trying to process what had just occurred. Lane called time and brought Holyfield to the ropes so the ring doctor could examine the damage. A piece of cartilage about an inch long had been bitten off. Holyfield was bleeding, but the doctor determined he could continue. Meanwhile, Mike Tyson stood in the neutral corner, his face still a mask of fury, spitting out the piece of Holyfield's ear that he had bitten off onto the canvas. Yes, you read that correctly. He spit it onto the ring floor. Mills Lane deducted 2 points from Tyson and sternly warned him that if anything like that happened again, he would be disqualified. Then he allowed the fight to continue. The crowd was in chaos now, booing, shouting, unsure what was happening. And Mike Tyson? Mike Tyson apparently wasn't finished. The second bite. When Mills Lane restarted the fight, Holyfield was understandably cautious. He had just been bitten by another human being in front of 16,000 people. His ear was bleeding, throbbing with pain. But he was a warrior, so he continued. They came together in the center of the ring. Another clinch. And then, incredibly, unbelievably, Mike Tyson did it again. He bit Holyfield's other ear. This time, Holyfield went absolutely ballistic. He tried to chase Tyson around the ring. Tyson, seeming to realize what he'd just done, started backing up, but also throwing wild punches at Holyfield. Mills Lane jumped between them, waving his arms, signaling that the fight was over. Disqualification. The MGM Grand Garden Arena erupted into absolute pandemonium. Holyfield's corner rushed into the ring to protect their fighter. Tyson's corner rushed in to try to control him. Police and security flooded the ring as Tyson tried to get at Holyfield again, throwing punches at anyone in his path. The ring became a mob scene. Pushing, shoving, cursing, objects being thrown from the crowd. It was chaos, pure and utter chaos. Mike Tyson had to be physically restrained and escorted out of the ring by security and police. As he left, the crowd pelted him with drinks, trash, anything they could throw. He was still trying to get at Holyfield, still in a rage. Evander Holyfield, bleeding from both ears, was quickly ushered to his dressing room for medical treatment. In the ring, Mills Lane stood alone for a moment, looking stunned by what had just transpired. Then he raised Holyfield's hand in absentia, officially declaring him the winner by disqualification. But nobody was celebrating. Nobody was cheering. Everyone was still trying to process what they had just witnessed. Mike Tyson, one of the greatest boxers of all time, had just bitten his opponent's ears. Twice. In a heavyweight championship fight, on pay-per-view, in front of the whole world. It was the most shocking moment in boxing history. The immediate aftermath. In the minutes and hours after the fight, chaos continued. The MGM Grand went into lockdown. Police and security struggled to control the situation as fights broke out in the crowd. People demanding their money back, others trying to get to Tyson's dressing room. In Holyfield's dressing room, doctors worked on his ears. The damage was significant. A piece of his right ear had been bitten completely off. It was later found on the ring canvas, and surgeons attempted to reattach it, though it didn't take. His left ear had deep bite marks, but wasn't severed. Holyfield, despite the bizarre and painful circumstances, remained remarkably composed. "I just want to know what happened," he told reporters who were allowed into his dressing room. "Why did he do that? That's not boxing, that's not anything." Meanwhile, in Tyson's dressing room, it was a different scene. Tyson was still agitated, pacing, claiming that Holyfield had been headbutting him and he had just retaliated. He showed no remorse, no understanding of the magnitude of what he'd done. "He butted me," Tyson kept saying. "Look at my eye, look at my eye." His promoter, Don King, tried to do damage control, talking to anyone who would listen, trying to spin the situation. But there was no spinning this. The Nevada State Athletic Commission immediately launched an investigation. The question wasn't if Tyson would be punished, but how severely. In the press conference later that night, Boxing Commissioner Mark Ratner addressed the media. "What happened tonight was deplorable," he said. "This is not boxing. This is not what this sport represents. Mr. Tyson will face serious consequences for his actions." The fallout. In the days following the fight, the bite fight became the biggest sports story in the world. It was on every news channel, every newspaper front page, every radio show. People who knew nothing about boxing were talking about it. The Nevada State Athletic Commission held hearings to determine Tyson's punishment. On July 9, 1997, just 11 days after the fight, they delivered their verdict. Mike Tyson's boxing license was revoked. He was fined $3 million, 10% of his purse for the fight. He would not be allowed to reapply for his license for at least 1 year. Tyson didn't attend the hearing, but his lawyers argued that he had been provoked by Holyfield's headbutts. The commission wasn't buying it. "There is no justification for that conduct," said Commission Chairman Dr. Elias Ganem. "Biting is not a normal boxing tactic." But the consequences went far beyond the official punishment. Tyson lost millions in endorsement deals. Companies that had been considering working with him immediately backed away. His reputation, already tarnished by his rape conviction and erratic behavior, was now irreparably damaged in the eyes of many. He became a joke on late-night talk shows. Saturday Night Live did skits about him. The bite fight was parodied, mocked, and endlessly replayed. Some defended Tyson, saying the headbutts had driven him to temporary insanity. Others condemned him as a savage, a disgrace to the sport. The Evander Holyfield recovered physically fairly quickly, though his right ear would never look quite the same. But he handled the entire situation with grace and dignity. When asked about Tyson, he refused to attack him. "I forgive him," Holyfield said in an interview weeks after the fight. "I'm a Christian, that's what we do. I don't hate Mike Tyson, I feel sorry for him." This response only made the contrast between the two men more stark. Holyfield, the classy champion. Tyson, the unhinged villain. Why did he do it? In the years since the bite fight, people have asked the same question over and over. Why did Mike Tyson bite Evander Holyfield? Tyson himself has given various explanations over the years, some more convincing than others. Immediately after the fight, his explanation was simple. Retaliation for the headbutts. He claimed that Holyfield had been butting him throughout both of their fights. The referee wasn't doing anything about it, and he snapped. "I was getting butted like crazy," Tyson said in an interview shortly after. "I got tired of it, so I bit him. I'm not proud of it, but it happened." But as time went on and Tyson did more self-reflection and therapy, his explanations became more nuanced. In his autobiography published years later, Tyson described being in a mental place where he felt completely out of control. He talked about the pressure he was under, the humiliation of losing the first fight, the rage that had been building inside him. "I was not in my right mind that night," Tyson wrote. "I was fighting with so much anger, so much hatred. When he butted me and I saw the blood, something just broke inside me. I became an animal." Psychologists and sports psychiatrists have analyzed the incident endlessly. Some believe it was a case of extreme frustration boiling over. Tyson was being outboxed again, could see the same pattern from the first fight repeating, and couldn't handle it mentally. Others point to Tyson's traumatic childhood, his history of violence, the lack of proper guidance after Cus D'Amato's death, and suggest that he was a deeply troubled man who never properly learned to control his darkest impulses. Some even theorize that it was a calculated decision, that Tyson knew he was losing and chose to get disqualified rather than be knocked out again. Tyson himself has rejected this theory. "I didn't want to quit," he said. "I was just crazy in that moment. I wasn't thinking about anything except hurting him." The truth is probably a combination of all these factors. A perfect storm of rage, frustration, mental instability, and provocation that led to one of the most shocking moments in sports history. The comeback again. Surprisingly, Mike Tyson's career wasn't over after the bite fight. After serving his one-year suspension, Tyson reapplied for his boxing license in 1998. There was significant opposition. Many people felt he should never be allowed to fight again. But boxing is a business, and Mike Tyson, even disgraced, was still a massive draw. The commission granted him his license back. Tyson returned to the ring in January 1999, fighting Francois Botha in Las Vegas. He won by knockout in the 5th round, and it seemed like maybe, just maybe, he could resurrect his career one more time. He fought several more times over the next few years with mixed results. He knocked out some opponents, lost to others. In 2002, he got one more shot at the heavyweight championship facing Lennox Lewis. Lewis dominated him, stopping him in the 8th round. Tyson's final professional fight was on June 11, 2005, against Kevin McBride. Tyson quit on his stool after the 6th round, refusing to come out for the 7th. "I don't have the guts to be in this sport anymore," Tyson said after the fight. tears streaming down his face. "I'm not going to disrespect this sport anymore by losing in front of you all." He retired with a professional record of 50 wins and 6 losses with 44 knockouts. On paper, it was a Hall of Fame career, but it would forever be overshadowed by that night in June 1997. What happened to Holyfield? Evander Holyfield continued fighting long after the bite fight, perhaps too long in the opinion of many. He had a few more significant victories, including a controversial draw against Lennox Lewis in 1999. Most observers thought Lewis had won, then lost the rematch later that year. He continued fighting well into his 40s, unable to let go of the sport that had given him so much. He had financial troubles. Despite earning over $200 million in his career, he faced foreclosure on his mansion and owed millions in back taxes and child support. He had 11 children with 6 different women. His final professional fight was in 2011 at age 48, when he defeated Brian Nielsen in Denmark. He continued to try to arrange fights even into his 50s, though thankfully none of the major commissions would license him. Today, Holyfield is retired and works as a motivational speaker and boxing commentator. His legacy is secure. A 4-time heavyweight champion, one of the greatest cruiserweights of all time, and a man who twice defeated Mike Tyson. But he'll always be remembered for having his ear bitten off. The Tyson Redemption. Perhaps the most surprising epilogue to the bite fight story is what happened to Mike Tyson in the years after his retirement. For a while, things got worse. Tyson declared bankruptcy in 2003 despite having earned over $400 million in his career. He struggled with drug addiction. He got into legal troubles. He seemed to be on a path to self-destruction. But then something changed. Tyson began working with a therapist and doing serious self-reflection. He became more open about his struggles, his pain, his mistakes. He started a one-man show, Mike Tyson, Undisputed Truth, where he talked honestly about his life, including the bite fight. He appeared in the movie The Hangover in a scene that brilliantly played on his image, showing a self-awareness and humor that people hadn't seen from him before. He launched a podcast, Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson, where he interviewed guests and talked openly about life, boxing, and everything in between. And perhaps most remarkably, he made peace with his past. In 2009, Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield appeared together on The Oprah Winfrey Show. For the first time since the fight, they sat down and talked openly about what happened. "I'm sorry for what I did," Tyson told Holyfield on national television. "I was in a very dark place in my life. I was wrong." Holyfield accepted the apology and the two men embraced. It was a powerful moment of reconciliation. In subsequent years, they've even appeared in commercials together, poking fun at the incident. In one particularly memorable ad for a video game, they recreated the bite, ending with both men laughing. The fact that they could joke about it, that they could move past it and develop a respectful relationship speaks to the growth both men have experienced. Today, Mike Tyson is in his late 50s. He's married and has children. He runs a cannabis business and continues his podcast. He's candid about his past, including his mistakes, but he's also clearly in a better place mentally and emotionally. In 2020, at age 54, he even returned to the ring for an exhibition match against Roy Jones Jr., showing that he still had some of his old fire. The fight was a draw, but more importantly, it showed a Mike Tyson who could still perform and entertain without the rage and violence that had defined so much of his life. The cultural impact. The bite fight has become more than just a sports moment. It's become a cultural touchstone, referenced in everything from hip-hop lyrics to comedy sketches to academic discussions about sports psychology. It's been analyzed in documentaries, recreated in video games, and endlessly memed on social media. Younger generations who never saw Mike Tyson fight in his prime know about the bite fight. It's a reminder of how quickly things can change, how one moment of lost control can define a legacy. Mike Tyson could have been remembered solely as one of the greatest boxers of all time, and he was for a while. But now when people think of Mike Tyson, they think of two things: his devastating knockout power and the night he bit off Evander Holyfield's ear. For Holyfield, the incident became a badge of honor in a strange way. He was the man who broke Mike Tyson, who pushed him past his breaking point. He handled the situation with such grace and professionalism that it enhanced his reputation. The bite fight also raised important questions about mental health in sports, about the pressure put on athletes, about what happens when the brain damage from years of being punched combines with pre-existing trauma and mental health issues. Boxing has always been a violent sport, but there's supposed to be nobility in that violence, rules, and honor even in combat. The bite fight violated that code in the most primal way possible, reminding everyone that underneath the technique and strategy, boxing is still about two humans trying to hurt each other. Lessons learned. So what can we learn from the bite fight of 1997? First, it's a cautionary tale about the importance of mental health. Mike Tyson was clearly struggling psychologically, and there weren't adequate support systems in place to help him. Today, there's more awareness about mental health issues in sports, though there's still a long way to go. Second, it's a reminder that even the greatest champions are human, capable of making terrible decisions in moments of pressure and anger. Nobody, no matter how talented or accomplished, is immune to losing control. Third, it shows the power of forgiveness and redemption. Both Tyson and Holyfield could have let this incident define them in purely negative ways. Instead, they both moved forward, found ways to grow from it, and eventually even made peace with each other. Fourth, it demonstrates how quickly a legacy can be altered. Mike Tyson spent years building a reputation as a fearsome boxer. In about 10 seconds, he added a very different element to that reputation. Finally, it's a story about consequences. Tyson faced significant professional and personal consequences for his actions. He lost millions of dollars, his license, his reputation. The bite fight cost him dearly, and those consequences followed him for years. But it's also a story about second chances and growth. The fact that Mike Tyson could come back from that moment, do the work to become a better person, acknowledge his mistakes, and rebuild some aspect of his life is a testament to the possibility of change. The technical questions. Even all these years later, some technical questions remain debated among boxing fans. Were Holyfield's headbutts intentional? Watch the footage and you'll see that some appear accidental. Natural consequences of two fighters working in close quarters. Others look more deliberate, with Holyfield using his head as another weapon. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Should Mills Lane have done more to control the fight? Some argue that if he'd been more proactive in warning Holyfield about the headbutts, Tyson might not have snapped. Others say that the referee's job is to control the action, and biting is so far outside the bounds of normal competition that no ref could have anticipated or prevented it. Could Tyson have won if he'd kept his composure? This is an interesting question. Holyfield was clearly winning the fight, but it was only in the third round. Tyson had come back from worse positions before, but mentally he seemed defeated even before the bite. Holyfield had broken him again. What if the first bite had been immediately disqualified? Would Tyson have learned his lesson? Or was he so far gone mentally that night that nothing would have stopped him? We'll never know. The business angle. From a business perspective, the bite fight was a disaster and a bonanza at the same time. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. The Nevada State Athletic Commission had to deal with thousands of refund requests. The MGM Grand faced potential lawsuits. Sponsors fled from anything associated with Tyson. But in the long term, the bite fight made money, lots of it. The pay-per-view was one of the highest-grossing boxing events ever, generating over $100 million in revenue. Yes, some people demanded refunds, but most didn't get them. The fight, such as it was, had happened, and the controversy only added to the legend. VHS tapes and later DVDs of the fight sold incredibly well. Documentaries about Tyson always featured the bite fight prominently. It became one of the most replayed moments in sports history. For better or worse, people wanted to see it. They wanted to witness the moment of madness. They wanted to understand what had happened. Even today, YouTube videos of the bite fight get millions of views. Articles about it get clicked on and shared. It remains one of the most searched-for boxing moments online. Don King, Tyson's promoter at the time, understood this. Despite the embarrassment and controversy, he knew that the bite fight had paradoxically made Tyson even more famous, even more of a draw. Controversial Mike Tyson was still profitable Mike Tyson. It's a cynical view, but it's also true. In sports and entertainment, sometimes infamy sells just as well as fame. The other bite fights. Interestingly, the Tyson-Holyfield bite wasn't the first time someone had bitten an opponent in combat sports, nor would it be the last. In 1983, mixed martial artist Dan Severn was bitten during a wrestling match. In 1997, before the Tyson incident, boxer Andrew Golota was accused of biting his opponent. And since then, there have been other biting incidents in MMA and even in amateur boxing. But none of them captured the public imagination like the Tyson bite. Why? Because of who was involved and the magnitude of the stage. This was Mike Tyson, arguably the most famous athlete in the world at the time. This was a heavyweight championship fight in Las Vegas, broadcast to millions. This was the biggest stage possible. If a no-name fighter bites someone in a small venue fight, it might make local news. When Mike Tyson does it in a mega fight, it becomes history. What might have been one of the saddest aspects of the bite fight is thinking about what might have been if Tyson had kept his composure. Even if he had lost the rematch to Holyfield, and he probably would have, losing honorably would have been so much better for his legacy than what actually happened. He could have had other title shots, other big paydays, other opportunities to cement his legacy. Instead, that moment of madness overshadowed everything else. When people rank the greatest heavyweight boxers of all time, Tyson's name always comes up. But so does an asterisk, the guy who bit someone's ear off. And for Tyson personally, the bite fight seemed to accelerate his downward spiral. The years after were some of the darkest of his life. While he eventually found some peace and redemption, it came at a tremendous cost. The medical perspective. From a medical standpoint, the bite fight raised some interesting questions. Evander Holyfield's ear was seriously damaged. Surgeons initially tried to reattach the bitten-off piece, but it didn't take. His right ear would forever look slightly deformed, a permanent reminder of that night. Human bites are actually quite dangerous from an infection standpoint. The human mouth contains a tremendous amount of bacteria. Holyfield had to undergo precautionary treatment to prevent infection. There were also questions about blood-borne pathogens. Both fighters had to be tested for diseases that could be transmitted through blood and saliva. Fortunately, both men were healthy in that regard. For Mike Tyson, the psychological damage was perhaps worse than any physical injury. The incident was symptomatic of deeper mental health issues that he would struggle with for years. The referee's perspective. Mills Lane, the referee that night, passed away in 2022. But in interviews over the years, he often spoke about the bite fight. "I couldn't believe it was happening. Lane said in one interview. In all my years of refereeing, I'd never seen anything like it. I'd broken up hundreds of clinches, warned fighters for all sorts of fouls, but this, someone biting, it was surreal. Lane was criticized by some for allowing the fight to continue after the first bite. His decision to deduct points and give Tyson a stern warning rather than immediately disqualifying him has been debated endlessly. I wanted to give the fans a fight, Lane explained. I thought maybe it was a one-time thing that Tyson would get control of himself. Obviously, I was wrong. When the second bite happened, Lane didn't hesitate. Immediate disqualification. The fight was over. The second time, I knew I had to stop it, Lane said. This wasn't boxing anymore. This was something else entirely. Lane was a tough, respected referee who had handled many difficult situations in the ring. The fact that even he seemed shaken by what happened speaks to how unprecedented the situation was. The media circus in 1997, social media didn't exist. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, none of them had been invented yet. But even without modern social media, the bite fight became a viral sensation. Every news network covered it, every newspaper put it on the front page. Radio shows talked about nothing else for days. It was the story that dominated every form of media. Sports Illustrated put it on the cover with the headline, "Unforgivable." ESPN replayed the bite over and over. International news organizations covered it extensively. Late-night talk show hosts had a field day. Jay Leno, David Letterman, Conan O'Brien, they all did multiple jokes about it. Saturday Night Live did an entire sketch recreating the incident. The bite became instant fodder for comedians, commentators, and anyone with an opinion. And everyone had an opinion. Some defended Tyson, arguing that the headbutts had driven him to it. Others condemned him as a savage who had disgraced the sport. Psychologists offered analysis, boxers weighed in. Fans argued in bars and living rooms across the country. It was the kind of media frenzy that we're more accustomed to now in the age of social media. But in 1997, it was extraordinary. The story had everything: violence, controversy, shock value, and larger-than-life personalities. The legal aftermath beyond the Nevada Athletic Commission's punishment, there were questions about potential criminal charges and civil lawsuits. Could Mike Tyson be criminally charged with assault? Technically, yes. Biting someone is assault even if it happens during a boxing match. Boxing regulations cover punching within certain rules, but biting is completely outside those rules. However, the Clark County District Attorney decided not to press criminal charges. The reasoning was that both men had consented to a violent confrontation, the boxing match itself, and that the matter had been handled by the Athletic Commission. Civil lawsuit, Holyfield could have sued Tyson for damages, pain, and suffering, etc. But he chose not to. In fact, Holyfield seemed eager to move past the incident and get back to boxing. "I'm not looking for more money from Mike Tyson," Holyfield said. "I just want to get back in the ring and fight again." This graciousness from Holyfield further enhanced his reputation as a class act. The comedy, despite, or perhaps because of, the shocking nature of the incident, the bite fight became a source of comedy gold. Jokes flew fast and furious. Mike Tyson's favorite restaurant, earlobe stir. What's Mike Tyson's favorite song? I Want Your Ear. Why did Mike Tyson become a vegetarian? He got tired of the taste of ears. These jokes, while tasteless, pun intended, became part of popular culture. The incident was so bizarre, so unexpected, that it lent itself to humor even though it involved real violence and injury. Even Tyson himself eventually started joking about it. Years later, he could laugh at the absurdity of what he'd done. That self-awareness and ability to laugh at himself became part of his redemption arc. In commercials, TV shows, and movies, references to the bite fight appeared constantly. It became shorthand for someone losing control, for going too far, for letting anger override reason. The conspiracy theories. As with any major controversial event, conspiracy theories emerged around the bite fight. Some people claimed it was all staged, that Tyson and Holyfield had planned it for publicity. This theory doesn't hold up to scrutiny. The damage to Tyson's career and reputation was too severe, and Holyfield's ear was genuinely badly injured. Others suggested that Tyson bit Holyfield because he knew he was losing and wanted to avoid being knocked out again. This theory is more plausible, but Tyson himself has consistently denied it, and most boxing experts believe it was a genuine loss of control rather than a calculated decision. Some conspiracy theorists pointed to Don King, suggesting the promoter had somehow orchestrated the incident for publicity. Again, this doesn't make sense. The bite hurt everyone's bottom line in the short term, even if it did create lasting notoriety. The truth is almost certainly the simplest explanation. Tyson lost his temper, couldn't control himself, and did something incredibly stupid in a moment of rage and frustration: the training camp. Interestingly, people close to Tyson's training camp later revealed that there had been warning signs during his preparation for the rematch. Sparring partners reported that Tyson had been erratic, sometimes brilliant and sometimes unfocused. His mood swings were pronounced. Some days he would train with incredible intensity, other days he seemed to be going through the motions. There were also reports of Tyson watching the first Holyfield fight obsessively, fixating on the moments where he believed Holyfield had been headbutting him. One member of his team later said, "We could see he was in a bad place mentally, but we didn't think it would lead to that. We thought once the bell rang he'd be able to focus on boxing. We were wrong." This raises an important question. Should the fight have happened at all? If Tyson's mental state was questionable, should his team have pulled him from the fight? In hindsight, probably yes. But in the moment, with millions of dollars on the line and the pride of wanting to avenge the first loss, those considerations were pushed aside. The generational divide. One fascinating aspect of the bite fight's legacy is how different generations view it. For people who watched it live or were adults in 1997, it remains a shocking, almost traumatic memory. They remember where they were when it happened, the disbelief, the controversy. For younger generations who only know about it through YouTube clips and memes, it's almost funny. A piece of absurd sports history, like a blooper reel moment on steroids. This generational divide reflects how time can change our perception of events. What was shocking and disturbing can become, over decades, a quirky piece of pop culture history. But for those who were there, who paid $50 or more for the pay-per-view, who watched two elite athletes reduced to a street brawl, the memory retains its visceral impact. Where they are now today, both Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield are retired from professional boxing and have moved on with their lives, though in very different ways. Mike Tyson, as mentioned, has found a kind of second act. His podcast is popular, his cannabis business is thriving, and he's become an unlikely source of wisdom and self-reflection on social media. He's open about his past mistakes, including the bite fight, and talks about the work he's done to become a better person. He's also become something of a pop culture icon again, appearing in movies, TV shows, and commercials. His cameo in The Hangover introduced him to a new generation of fans who appreciate his self-deprecating humor and surprising gentleness. Evander Holyfield has had a rockier post-boxing life financially, but he remains active in the boxing community as a commentator and trainer. He speaks at churches and motivational events, sharing his story of faith and perseverance. Both men seem to have made peace with what happened that night in 1997. They've appeared together multiple times, showing that forgiveness and moving forward are possible even after such a traumatic incident. The bite fight in boxing history. Where does the bite fight rank among the most important moments in boxing history? It's certainly one of the most infamous. But is it important in terms of the sport's technical development or its greatest competitive moments? No. The bite fight didn't change how boxing is practiced or taught. It didn't introduce new strategies or techniques. It didn't settle a long-running debate about who was the better fighter, though it did confirm that Holyfield had Tyson's number. What it did do was capture the public imagination in a way few sporting events ever have. It became a cultural touchstone, a moment that transcended sports. In that sense, it's important not for what happened in terms of boxing, but for what it revealed about competition, pressure, mental health, and human nature. It's a cautionary tale, a joke, a tragedy, and a redemption story all rolled into one. The final analysis. 27 years after the bite fight, we can look back at it with some perspective. Mike Tyson's legacy is complicated. He was one of the most devastating punchers in heavyweight history, a cultural phenomenon who captured the public's imagination like few athletes ever have. But he also made terrible decisions, hurt people, both in and out of the ring, and struggled with demons that often got the better of him. The bite fight was the lowest point of his career, the moment when those demons took complete control. But it wasn't the end of his story. His subsequent journey towards self-awareness and redemption has been remarkable. Evander Holyfield's legacy is clearer. He was a warrior, a champion who always fought with heart and dignity. The way he handled the bite fight, with grace, forgiveness, and class, only enhanced that legacy. The fight itself remains one of the most shocking moments in sports history. A reminder that even in the controlled environment of professional athletics, things can spiral out of control in an instant. It's a story about the thin line between competition and violence, between discipline and rage, between greatness and infamy. It's a story that could only happen in boxing, a sport that's always existed in the space between athletic competition and primal combat. And it's a story that, despite its shocking nature, ultimately contains a message of hope. That even after our worst moments, redemption is possible. That forgiveness can be granted. That people can change. Mike Tyson bit off a piece of Evander Holyfield's ear on June 28, 1997 in Las Vegas, Nevada, and in doing so created a moment that will be discussed, analyzed, and remembered for as long as people talk about sports. But both men survived that moment. Both men moved beyond it. Both men found ways to continue their lives and make peace with their past. The bite fight will never be forgotten. But it's no longer the only thing that defines either man. And maybe that's the real lesson, that we are more than our worst moments, that one night of madness doesn't have to define a lifetime, and that the capacity for growth, change, and redemption exists in all of us. Even Iron Mike Tyson, even on the worst night of his life, even after the bite. Epilogue: the legacy lives on. As I finish writing this story, Mike Tyson is 58 years old and Evander Holyfield is 62. Both men are grandfather figures now, far removed from their days as the baddest men on the planet. The MGM Grand still hosts big fights, though none have quite matched the sheer chaos of that June night in 1997. The piece of Holyfield's ear that was bitten off. According to some reports, it was never found. According to others, it was found but couldn't be successfully reattached. The exact fate of that piece of cartilage has become part of the legend, with various apocryphal stories circulating. The bite fight has been immortalized in video games, mentioned in countless songs, recreated in movies and TV shows. It's been the subject of academic papers about sports psychology. It's been analyzed by everyone from boxing experts to behavioral scientists. And every time a fighter loses their temper in the ring, every time someone crosses the line from competition to violence, the bite fight gets mentioned. It's become the standard by which all other sporting controversies are measured. Well, at least he didn't bite anyone's ear off, people say. That's the standard Mike Tyson set on June 28, 1997. For better or worse, the bite fight will live forever in sports history. A bizarre, shocking, ultimately human moment when the thin veneer of civilization and sporting conduct fell away, and we saw the raw, primal rage underneath. It was the night Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear. It was the night boxing was reminded that it's a combat sport and combat can be unpredictable and dangerous. It was the night that changed two men's lives forever, and it's a night that will never ever be forgotten.